Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, for more than a few years now, we have been helping salespeople remove hope from how they sell. Now, you may not think that hope plays a great part in how you sell. Maybe you're out there, you're one of the star performers on your team. Maybe you're out there absolutely knocking down your sales goals, your numbers reflect your success, and you're thinking to yourself, well, Sean, I found your podcast or I saw you speak, thought I'd check it out. But hope, I don't really think I've got a lot of hope, man. I've got results. Well, here's the thing about results. If we don't actively attempt to improve our existing results, the law of atrophy will kick in. Those results will begin to decrease as the market changes, as the economy changes, as a global pandemic rocks the way that we sell. So we have to consistently look for where hope is entering the picture and begin to remove it. And maybe you are a star performer, or maybe it's your first couple of days in this great career of sales. If you're not removing hope from how you sell as an active thing that you're spending time each week, you're focused on doing, then your competitors will pass you up. Your prospects will begin to lose touch with the power of the solution that you bring to the table, and your sales career will begin to suffer. So since day one, we've been reaching out into the world of sales to find those people that are great at removing hope from their sales process, from the sales process of the salespeople that they supervise, and from sales organizations around the world. We've been able to bring on best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, and people that are in the field managing sales teams. Now, if you're catching this on the live stream or you're thinking, well, bulletproof selling, what does that have to do with sales? I happen to be dressed in my military garb because I had the fortunate blessing of being a war correspondent in the U.S. Marine Corps, embedded alongside Marines, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, folks that are out there in the battlefield, and you better believe that they're not hoping for success. They're reliant on their systems, their training, and on continually improving the systems that they use in order to survive, to accomplish their mission, and to get back home to their families. Well, if you're in the field of sales, thankfully, life is not on the line every single day. But you know what is? Your sales success. So as we get out there and find people that are brilliant at using process and using systems for how they sell, we make sure that every single one of these episodes results in me and my guest building a sales system that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. There are a few people out there that I consistently am looking at online. I'm making sure I'm following them because their sales career is an upward trajectory of benefiting from the use of process and systems, from not just hoping that they or their salespeople do the right thing or say the right thing or ask the right questions, but capturing what works, capturing those best practices and building them into something that works no matter how their day went the day before, how much sleep they might have gotten or not gotten, whether their sales day is going in the direction they hoped it would or not. They want to show up as high performers. And so those sales leaders that are out there, especially leading teams in that way, those are the people that I follow. And it's my honor to bring back on the show one of those salespeople. So David Copeland and I had met at an event, it's got to be 5 or 6 years ago, but we've been keeping in touch, following each other. I brought him on Bulletproof Selling, where we talked about how to remain relevant in how you're conducting outreach, especially after COVID-19 changed the way that a lot of us view the solutions that we're looking for and how we sell. So without further ado, because I'm going to learn as much from him as any of my listeners, I'm going to welcome back onto the show Mr. David Copeland. Sir, welcome back to Bulletproof Selling.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant. How are you doing today?
It's a great day, man. It's a great day. I'm down here in Tampa, Florida. It's beautiful weather outside. After I get done with this interview, I'm probably going to go sit outside. So my guess is you're probably in a colder climate. Am I right?
You're correct. It was 18 degrees last night, but that's fine. Warm office, and as you were saying, Sean, you kind of alluded to the fact a lot of the followers and the people that we're selling to and prospecting really don't care what we're wearing, where we're at. They just want a solution.
Yeah.
And so we've talked in the past, and I first of all appreciate being invited back. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but hopefully, I always think that if you can pull one tip that changes your life or changes the business or trajectory of your business or the business that you're working with or the people you're working with, whether, I keep it pretty basic, as and very transparent. If it's at the grocery store or the place you eat, or especially in your business or with your partners, I think that's really the effect that we all look for to make a change in this world right now.
And for the folks, David, that didn't catch your previous episode or they didn't get your bio off of LinkedIn, tell us a little bit about your sales journey, because you're in a pretty unique industry where you're dealing with products that aren't available on any store shelf. So it's a very niched industry, and your salespeople are responsible for making sure that the planes that we all fly on actually stay in the air. So talk to us a little bit about your sales career, how you ended up in your industry. What's kind of that 30,000-foot overview of your path?
Sure. So I think, it's been a family type affair that we've had. My dad also was served in the military, so I appreciate your service. He was in the Army and a paratrooper, and I'll never forget, Sean. He said one thing before he passed. He says, "David, never jump out of an airplane that with that engine that's running." So all my buddies say, "Oh, no, I'm not doing that." I will live by that one.
Yeah.
So I think my career, has been aviation. My mother and father are legacy aviators in the business. My mom air raced. She was the president of the 99s, which is International Organization of Licensed Women Pilots. So, you know, what we see today in diversity and what we see in women is fantastic. And I saw as the Super Bowl, the flyover with 4 women
Yeah.
fighter jets was a huge, not only a mark, but, really a testament to the fact that all of us can fly at a high level.
Hmm.
And so I think, really that's just brought me through the aviation industry, working for some really fantastic leaders in the industry, and right now working for another fantastic industry leader, Tecnam Aircraft over in Italy. So I'm the
Yeah.
representative and director of sales for the US and Canada. And of course, we all wear multiple hats. We think, sales is sales. Well, sales is a big word that is happens to be, much larger than hope, right?
Yeah.
Mentioned earlier. So my background really is, I flew for the airlines. I worked for fantastic Cessna and for Beechcraft and Mooney Airplane Company, and worked in the MRO business. So I kind of got the whole landscape all in one. But I think sales is sales, and prospecting, those things, as we've talked in the past, are, you can look at all the things online and all the things that are available to us now that weren't many years ago when I started. Some of the basics are still there, whether it's print or whether you're people. So I go back to the basics. I think that those are some of the best. So we can talk about some of those things as you talk about the system and how people will divide into that system of sales. Systems of, a word that could be a little sterile to people. This is my system, and I don't doubt you got a great system going, or you wouldn't have these many followers and be so successful. But I say personalize that system to what works for you and what works for your customers and your prospects. I really personalize everything today, because as we've talked in the past through the pandemic, people are really tired of change and they don't want anything new. You really got to prove yourself even more about your product and your services and yourself. They've got to trust you before they're going to let you in, whether it's that initial interview through a virtual meeting or on site. So we can go from there. But I like to say system, but I really personalize that, who you are and what you are and what you're selling.
And from the military, David, we love acronyms. And I know in the aviation industry, a lot of acronyms as well. I heard something recently. I can't claim credit for it because I didn't invent it, but it's an acronym that they've actually built out of the word system. And it's save yourself time, earn money sooner.
Right.
So that really applies to why systems are so powerful in sales. And a lot of our guests, David, are folks that are out there serving the industry of sales. They're producing something that's a bolt onto a CRM. They're helping people better research prospects. They're helping people better manage pipelines. But the folks that we get on like you that are actively managing sales teams, well, you're like that platoon commander out there on the front line, having to make sure that your troops are doing the right thing and driving the mission forward. So I'm curious, what are you seeing or not seeing in the field of sales right now as it applies to systems and processes? Are we having to change so fast right now that systems and processes are having to be updated every day, so it's tough to keep a handle on which ones we should be using? Or are you seeing your top salespeople use systems and process in a way that helps them track their time, their effort, and prioritize their prospect and outreach? I'm curious, where do you see that playing in right now?
That's a lot. And I think that, I kind of go back to basics again. I mean, we've been flooded because of the pandemic. I think that was not an excuse, but that was something that's even real today. I think that we have to go back to all these tools that we have. Before it was some books and we had, go to lectures and we do all that. A lot of that got cut out because of, the fact that there weren't as many. It all went online. And I think those are fantastic tools, but I think the barrage of those that we've been inundated with can distract us from what people really want. I go back to the basics. What's the first thing we want to do is communicate. We've got to listen a bit to our customer. We've got to really do a lot of background. I mean, there's so much available to us that wasn't, and it's great that we have these tools in our computers and in our laps and our everything is a computer nowadays, and it's fantastic, but it's almost overload. I think we've really got to listen and provide a solution. So use all those tools, and don't get buried in your CRM, and don't get buried in all of the things that can make us, because people are people. We all got up this morning and put our pants on the same way. I kind of get back to the basics of that. So let's be human about it. Okay. Let's approach it with empathy, that they may be suffering, or they may need your tool, or they may not. So getting in the door is really important. But if you can prove yourself, so listening is first. Listen, do a ton of background. When we were at Cessna, we used to know what kind of gum they chewed, what the spouse or partner drank. So it was on the airplane when they got on for the demo. So try to remove any of those things that might be different, right? So because that kind of relates back to the change that the world continues to go through. So listen, I do a lot of observing. Personalize it, personalize everything you do, because that's how you're going to gain the relationship in the beginning and all the way through, because none of us want a single sale. I always want that repeat customer, and also a huge part of it is a testimonial from those people. So, and also I think another one, I talked a little bit earlier with you offline about being present. They are the number one. It doesn't matter how many other things you've got on your calendar. I think when people say, well, I've got to get off this call, or I've got another appointment, that no one really cares, right? They should be. I always remember customer's king, right? And prospects, you've got to gain their trust. Another one is be available. I learned from I think a very successful sales team that put your email and everything, put your phone number, so they don't have to search around and look for something. Make it easy for them to contact you, because with the internet and with everything else, they're on to the next page. They're on to the next person that they're going to shop with. And be flexible. If they I booked an appointment for tomorrow on Saturday for lunch with one of our prospects, that, we've got to do that. That's what salespeople do. So those are just a few things that we use in the system as personal. Oftentimes, expecting it at an airport's pretty basic. You drive through the parking lot, you see the cars, you see the people, and all that. So
okay, now you're back. Yeah, we were losing audio just a second. So yeah, internet is always fun. Now
yeah.
you just laid out probably a dozen different things that each of them could be their own system. Right. So this is why we're having you back on the show, David, because whatever we pull out of that pocket is probably going to be a great system for any salesperson. Something that you'd mentioned earlier to me was that the idea of reaching out to people in today's day and age, when we're inundated with so many things, so many priorities, if we're not showing up with something that's going to actually solve a problem in our prospect's life, then we're going to be relegated to the back of their list of priorities, probably after emptying the kitty litter. And even if they don't own a cat, I've often been relegated to that position when I didn't show up with a solution. So a lot of salespeople, and I've been guilty of this, and it's a constant thing that we're all working to improve, is keeping up to date on what our prospects are actually challenged with. You mentioned doing that research before you pick up the phone. So where do you see salespeople relying on hope in that they call and they mention, I'm Bob Smith, I sell aviation parts. Do you need some of that? There's a massive assumption. There's a lot of hope that the prospect is going to need it and going to recognize the value of what I have to offer. So where do you see salespeople relying on hope that their prospects are going to automatically connect the dots between what you're selling and the solution that they need?
Well, I don't like that 4-letter word.
Me neither.
I never rely on hope. I think trust is a much better word, and observance and listening and investigation. That's a pretty high level word, but really do your homework. I mean, you've got, one of the tools that we use as you use is LinkedIn. I mean, that's one of the best. I mean, I think it's the business Facebook. I'm not a social media person. I think our company does a fantastic job of that. I don't need to add on top of that. They do it much better than I'll ever do. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes that people get so wrapped up in those other things that distract them from what the customer really needs or prospect really needs. So there's a couple of words I don't use, and you use maybe one of them other than hope was assume nothing. Went to the most trouble. And the other word I never use is no. No is a word nobody wants to hear anymore. And when I worked at American Airlines, there's one button, and I won't tell you which one it is, in the old Sabre system in American that changes your whole reservation. So, you get frustrated when the flight's oversold, or you can't get on, and we all are trying to get to that all important appointment. I think those are things we've got to be able to work around those things and do a lot of background views. So, when you go in or you're making that first initial call or interview, the person's name that's the decision maker. And if they say, well, no, he or she is not in today, then you'll know. So who's the next person? So in my business, it might be the chief flight instructor, it might be the owner, it might be an investor, it might be an influencer, it might be all those people. So I think one of the things that is really powerful is to make a checklist. It's a pilot, and I think we could operate with a checklist of, do you have all of these things and are you prepared for that first initial call? What are the influencers? Who's the decision makers? Like I said, again, what's their situation? If in this case, if I'm selling or a team selling to a flight school, well, if they just bought a whole fleet of new airplanes, probably not the best people to call unless they're all sitting on the ramp with the cowlings off. That's another indication you'll find out, which we've observed when our team goes out and looks, and if half the airplanes have the cowlings off or on the ramp, maintenance must be an issue, right? So I think really doing that background work. Also, don't make it, it's kind of like an interview. Don't make your first interview the job you're going to go for. So we oftentimes, kind of do that flyover. We'll do some investigation. We have boots on the ground. We have them drive by. I really think that personalization, how many people are actually going to the offices or going and making those prospect visits? Very few. Everybody wants to go on the internet and make it very impersonal, virtual. That's a great initial, because if they say, A, if they take the appointment, that's fantastic. And B, if they'll spend some time with you virtually and you can find out more about, them and their background, and they may bring other people, invite them, that's even a better thing. And then try to get the appointment to them to say, well, let me show you what we can do. Let me bring the product out. That's very powerful, because that's taking time. Time's the only thing we can't buy. So we need to be observant of that. I think that's probably, those are basics again, but I think we've got all these tools. I think it really comes down to what I'm using with my team as a checklist.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the checklist is something that we live and die by in the military. And you mentioned before that, systems can become sterile. Well, the beauty of a checklist is this thing is not the 10 commandments delivered on Mount Sinai that's never going to change.
Right.
A checklist, as it applies to sales, should be updated pretty regularly as we learn new things, as we hear an objection that we hadn't heard before, as we have trouble accessing a decision maker. What is that thing on the checklist that needs to alter so that we avoid that problem or we mitigate or eliminate it entirely? So, David, as we talked about solutions, I'm really attached to the idea of using a checklist throughout any part of the sales process. And there are some that we can automate within our CRMs, like a campaign. And there are some that we need to have in front of us so that when we're in that initial prospect conversation, that thing flows smoothly. Because a 10-part checklist, as you well know, and I know your salespeople do, I may start at point number 1, but then because of what the prospect says or does, I need to jump to point number 5. So it's not something that I am forced into a linear process. Well, no, hold on, David. We got to go to point number 2 on my checklist because I need to find out about budget. No, that's not the way those checklists work. They're fluid documents. Cover all 10 items or all 20 items, but you don't have to do it in any specific order. So I'm really curious then about preparing for the initial call. I think this would be such a valuable sales system based on what you and I have talked about and what I know your salespeople are out there having to learn every single day. So as you remember from our past show, David, we use this acronym TRIM to trim hope away from our sales strategy. So if I'm a salesperson, whether I've got 20 years in an industry or I've got 20 days, I could benefit from better preparing for my initial calls. Whether that thing came in on a warm lead, whether my best customer, Bob, referred Sally, his best friend, who's pretty much a done deal because Bob has a lot of trust and faith in what we do. In any case, I'm going to need to be prepared for that initial call, which means a little bit of research, a little bit of questions, a little bit of discovery, a little bit of not assuming, as you mentioned, which means I had to walk in there with some stuff already set. So in this acronym TRIM, the T is the trigger element. Where do I need to be preparing for that initial call, David? Is it, when I got a prospect's name in front of me and I begin to research their company? Is it earlier? Is it later? Where would you recommend, if you're coaching a salesperson, how to prepare for that initial call? Where do they pull this checklist off the shelf? What part of the sales cycle?
Right. So, that all that part of prospecting, and we are inundated right now with people shopping, of course, on the internet, downloading brochures, asking for things. And I think one of the things is the time that we respond and how we respond, I think is really important. I think being personal, again, I keep saying that, but how many people, you've downloaded, I know we're not selling gym memberships here. We're selling airplanes in my case.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit different approach and the professionalism that goes with that. Not that those industries are not professional, but the approach is a really big one. But I think we keep going back to know as much as you can about that company and that individual. Go through their, really do a deep dive on the company and what they've been through. Look at what, in our case, what they're flying, what brands they're flying, how long the
Mm,
contract is there. Talk to people. I was just at a large flight school very, 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 most recently, and I talked to the students. I went out and actually didn't ask questions of some of the leadership that I had already known about, but I went to the students. What are you seeing? In this case, there were several aircraft that were grounded, right? So we want to talk about why, how does that affect the whole school and the academy that they're flying for? Yeah, well, I couldn't go out and do this. These people are paying quite a bit of money to attend these universities. We want reliable products. So hey, reliability is a huge one, right? Maintenance,
mm,
the cost. So could we provide a better solution with more efficiency? So bringing things to the table immediately and finding a solution for something. And that's all about intel. I mean, you really got to be, I call it the 007 effect. It really does work. Knowing that prospect and that customer as well as you can to walk in the door, so that we try to minimize surprises. People don't like change and surprises. Again, Sean, I keep coming back to those, but it's so true nowadays. Don't bring me something that I've already seen or that I don't need, and try to cut the salesy part out of it. These are
mm.
professionals. They wouldn't, you wouldn't get this far, all of your viewers, if they weren't professionals and watching you and learning from all of us. I hope if we can bring one thing to the table from that checklist, or like you said, we jump from number 3 to number 27. While you're there, you may fill in 15 through 20, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the things you've observed, the people you've talked to, and then the recap as the second visit or the second demonstration or a demonstration. Then you can bring in all those things that you learned. And that's pretty impressive, because they can tell if you did be relevant. Relevant means doing your homework and knowing those things and knowing those people and creating that relationship. Because I take it kind of like this, Sean. It's pretty basic, but wherever you shop, whether it's a grocery store or let's just say we're going out to buy, an Army shirt. So you go to the Army barrack and you're shopping. So the experience you get at that is probably going to be different than at Nordstrom, maybe.
Right.
So the Nordstrom is probably very in tune. They're going to show you other things. They're going to demonstrate the product. They're going to stay with you. They're going to be personalized. They'll look you up. They'll say, well, you shopped here before. I'm going to offer you another something else. We really appreciate your business. And they're going to package your good and print the receipt or put it on email. And then they're going to bring the package around to you, right?
Mhm.
Personalize it, right? Very, very different. So I say personalizing the package is huge. And in the presentation, in your first call, I mean, it's make or break. That first impression is really, really important.
I love that. So we've got a couple of things to track then. And obviously, David's in a specific industry, but what he's talking about can apply no matter where you are in whatever industry. He talked about figuring out what are they currently using. If it's a product or service like mine, if we can learn that online, awesome. If not, it's one of the first items on our checklist. How long have they been using that? Another valuable question. Are they brand new? In which case, maybe we need to wait, a certain period of time before we think they're going to likely make a change. Or if they've been using this for 20 years, it works, but we just haven't changed because of the cost of change. That's another great thing to know. He talked about what are their end users saying. So if the people that you're selling to are not the end users of their products, what are the end users concerned with? What did they value? Is it reliability, like David said? Is it safety? If we know what their end users are concerned about and we can bring that solution to the table, we can make our customers look like rock stars because they're providing exactly what their customers need. And then, of course, he also mentioned what makes us relevant to them. What's going on in their world? What's going on in their industry? What's going on in their lives? That suddenly, when we call, we can say something, do something, present something, show something that makes us incredibly relevant to what they're facing that day, that week, that quarter. So we've got a really great couple of triggers in there, David, to make sure that we're ready. Now let's use the R in trim. Let's make this thing repeatable. What does that checklist look like? If I was going to, I know you and I have built checklists for our sales teams that, maybe 30 items long, because it can really get that deep and that complicated. Doesn't mean you have to ask all 30 items in a certain order or even get all 30 items knocked out on a single call. But what would you say are maybe the top 6 to 10 items that we really should have in front of us to get prepared for and then execute a great first call?
Well, I think again the background and the trigger and all those things that were super important. I think being relevant, being available, all those things I talked about before. I think the point of, getting that first call or getting the second or third call, also the reliability of your product and the trust you build. I mean, in solving, I come back to the solution piece of it, because there's more opportunities for change, right? So if we're going out and presenting an aircraft, we're presenting a service solution. What their background. A lot of it is, like you mentioned before, the product they're using now might not be the one, or it might be similar to yours. So you've got a little bit uphill battle. You've got to, build that trust of your company. How long have you been in business? Our happens to be, we're going to celebrate 75 years in our business, which is huge to the fact that we can offer. We've been around a while, right? So the reputation is an R word that I like to use a lot. What's your reputation in the marketplace? It needs, you've got to prove that to them, that a change and something that you may be using, know about the other product. So know about what the reliability of that product is, the challenges that they might face with that. Our industry is, as we see, I saw just yesterday, learning a lot about other aircraft that were grounded in fleets because of certain maintenance issues. Know that. Don't throw it on them, but know and be observant of that. Don't say, well, I heard your fleet was grounded. That's not what we need to talk about. It's our solution is more reliable. One thing that we haven't covered yet, I think, it's not just present, but what's the future? How can your product bring additional profit or reliability to their business? Or, those things that we really like, is it efficient? Is it more affordable? If we get you on a program, whatever it may be that you're selling, I think really to look to the future, because a lot of people don't want to look at history, right? Because it's probably not really, why would they be talking to you, right? To sell something if they're satisfied with what they have. That solution is not only for today, but for tomorrow. So plan the future in your presentation as that company that can provide that seamless solution for the future. I think that's a huge thing that we talk about. And what are the features and benefits of your product to prove that now and into the future? So our products, we have products that burn on low lead MoGas, which is huge. If you're in California, you can't even get 100 low lead at a lot of places. For some of your viewers, the fuel that you put in the aircraft, there's a lot of static about that. So we provide both. We even provide a Jet A powered diesel aircraft. We're looking at hybrid. We're looking at all electric. We're flying those articles and teaming with people. So credibility that you build with your partners, that you can prove to them. So they might not know you, Sean, or me when you go in, but if you can tell the people that you're working with NASA, like we are on an all-electric aircraft, the F-57 program that we're working with. Also, if you can prove that you're working with Rolls-Royce on a program, you're working with Rotax, which everybody knows about a Rotax if you've been on the lake or in the air, one of the most reliable and up-and-coming engines in the marketplace. Those are credible. So bring credible sources to you and for the future, not just today, but why should I buy this? But here I am a year from now looking for somebody else. You've got to tell them through, as you mentioned earlier, testimonials from other customers that continue to use your product.
So you've mentioned some things that are actually, it seems like I'm gonna back this up. I'm gonna flip it, because all the things that we've been talking about, I realize, are the repeatable parts of your checklist.
Right.
The things you've mentioned, from what makes us relevant, figuring that out ahead of time. So you've got some opening statements that capture your prospect's attention. You've talked about what advantages or disadvantages does our competition have over us, so I can make sure that I'm prepared to address that. I've been in so many sales calls, and I'm sure you have in the early stages of your career, David, where they hit you with, well, we're already using your competitor. You're like, oh, well, I guess this call's done, because I don't know how to address. Like, okay, well, I guess you're already set then. No, of course they're not set. You could do something better, differently, something that you have. So that's another great repeatable part. What are they focused on today and tomorrow? If you can learn what they're focused on today and have a idea, not an assumption because you've done your research, but an idea of what they're probably going to be focused on tomorrow, that makes you incredibly valuable as well. So those are all great repeatable parts of this process to build into that checklist to get you prepared, because like you said, as many of these as we can answer before we get on the phone, the better staged and prepared we are for a successful mission, which is not making a sale. It's adding value, providing a solution to our prospect's life. So if we've got a trigger element, making this repeatable, let's talk about making it improvable. What are the things that I'm going to be looking at to change, or examining, or paying attention to, so that my checklist isn't the same today as it will be 5 years from now? Because our pre-COVID checklist is not going to work as well today. Right? It was great in 2019, but today, not so great. So we've got to adapt it. We've got to modify it. What am I going to be doing to improve this, David?
Well, I think listening and observing is a huge one, because as we say, things are going to come off that checklist and onto the checklist, things that you
Yeah.
learn from that. I think as each of these businesses, I'm going to be more broad about this, is the products that you're offering. I mean, the checklist is going to change. Be, as you say, be relevant. The new and innovations that are coming to the marketplace, whatever it is, from airplanes to widgets, whatever you're selling or presenting, know about what is the most relevant thing that is innovative. We talk about sustainability. Nobody else in our industry is doing the sustainable products that we are offering those. You've got to think about, is somebody in the decision-making checklist, are they environmentally friendly? Is the state, is there a noise restriction? You need to know all of those facts. And when they say, well, so how does your aircraft or your product compare in this specific circumstance? Know those facts, because especially you want to highlight them as a benefit. We were at another institution, and they said, we're getting complaints from the neighbors. You've heard it about jets flying out of LAX and all the places, Teterboro, especially in California. There's the density
Yeah,
of that.
the noise ordinances there are crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so we offer one of the lowest footprints of sound and flyover of anybody in the industry. Of course, that's going to be in my presentation, right? Because they
Ah,
letters, they don't want to get the politicians all after them to slow down the aviation, because general aviation is growing and very sustainable and can be very profitable to support transportation in this world, which is super important. So bringing those things that will change, that will be added, that weren't relevant years ago, like the fuel piece is sustainability and flexibility in their fleet, different ways they can attract people, like attract students to our products, is because we're the most innovative with the latest certification, all those things. Safety, you mentioned. There's no one else that has certified aircraft more recently than our company into that training network. And I'm not trying to plug here. I'm just trying to say, apply it to your product. So let's
mhm.
just say you're selling some set of whatever it is to a machinery shop, and your machinery shop, is using a lot of more antiquated equipment, but your tools and things can be a solution for them. And are they to the very latest, right? Are they
Mhm.
are they innovative? What are you doing to extend that? So you may be looking at a product to solve things now, but you can also share with them what your company might be doing for the future to solve additional challenges that they have. So I think that whole thing about the company and the presence and the products needs to be extended. And that really does apply to the checklist. Asking a lot of questions is not a bad thing, because if you can ask questions that are relevant during either the phone or in person, they'll know that you've done your homework and that you're interested in making them, a more successful business.
And to find out what's relevant to them today that wasn't relevant when we initially built this checklist. And obviously, if we're professionals in our industry, we're keeping up with industry changes, market changes. We're learning about just the problems that are affecting our prospects and our customers today that might not have been affecting them during COVID, or might not have been affecting them at the height of
Right.
a bull market. And now we're in a recession. So being able to keep up to date with that means adjusting the checklist so that you can address it in those sales meetings. Your folks know this person's not just reading me a script that was built in 1975 where he asked me what's keeping me up at night. I don't have time for that. But you
Right.
bring me a problem to a problem, you bring me a solution, excuse me, to a problem I'm actually facing, you have my attention. Even if I'm not going to buy from you, I'll take your call,
Sure.
because I might learn something as a prospect that's going to help me. And of course, if you continue to provide value, why wouldn't I do business with you? Because I want access to somebody working on my behalf as a partner to help me grow my business or improve my life in some way. So this is amazing, Dave. We've got trigger, repeatable, improvable. Now let's talk about measuring, because obviously this flows all the way through everything in the aviation industry. We have to measure it in order to make sure it's safe and reliable. Same thing in combat. We have to measure the success of what we're doing. So we know, do we need to allocate more resources to this next time? Fewer resources? Do we need to bring more tech, less tech?
Right.
On a system, on a checklist that I'm building to help me prepare for that first call, what am I going to measure at the tail end of using this for a quarter, let's say, to make sure that it's worth doing? Or should I just get my salespeople back to kind of winging it? Because we were getting okay results then. But what am I going to measure to make sure that this is worth continuing to use and continuing to invest time in?
Right. So hope and winging it don't work in my vocabulary. So you're bringing up, I don't know, we haven't talked about those, but we can't afford to wing it nowadays. And,
Yeah.
and we will lose our prospect or customer immediately if they think we're coming in there just making some sly thing to market checklist that, yeah, I told my boss I went to visit these people and presented the product. That's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Right. So I think one of the things is we really, whatever works for you. So if you're working from you can have the main sterile checklist that we work from, and then make it work for you and your style of selling. I mean, and your customer and their style, right? So if you know that, they're pretty casual and this, don't show up in a three-piece suit in Florida, right? So you want to show, so really a lot of it goes into what works. What are you finding from the other people that you've talked to about your product, specifically in the same industry? What has really been the trigger point for them, right? Using that trigger word again, what is making it more relevant? What are the things and solutions and benefits that you might not have known about, believe it or not, when you show up and they say, well, this is really what's really important in our industry. Did you just read about this change or this certification or this challenge we have? So I think knowing that ahead and learning from your last visit what worked and doesn't work. I mean, some of these are trial and error. We don't like hope, but some of these are, you never know. You come in with this plan and they come in and they say, I really appreciate this, but let me take you out here and let me show you what's really going on. That's super cool, right?
Oh yeah.
Now you're able to observe, you're able to mix with the people, you're able to, when they take a phone call during your visit, which is okay, you show up, you're taking their time, which you can't buy, let them do whatever they need to do, and then slip off to the side and say, so what's it like? How are you finding out about this? Or what's going on? What's reliable? Why, if you see the whole hanger torn apart about an engine, they're probably having some challenges with supply chain, which we come in and offer something much more reliable and more innovative for the future. So I think you do a lot of observance, and you can add those or subtract those to the checklist. If they're not relevant anymore, take them off, right? Let's not try to overwork ourselves. So I think really it kind of comes from experience, and that's sometimes painful. You go out of that and you say, oh, that didn't work, right? Learn from that, right? Learn from your customers. And a lot of them will say, you know what, Dave, I really appreciate you coming in today and all the time and the effort you've taken, but here's what I really need, right? So that's awesome. Maybe you didn't know that. Maybe it's a project that you weren't invited to share with them, or that they didn't divulge to you. So I think you can learn from that too. So I think really to change that checklist is really kind of based on experience, and you've got to run it a couple times. Like I said, don't go to the first interview and expect that job. Do some trial runs if you can afford to do that. But I think a lot of it, it's got to be fluid. It's got to be personal. You got to build that relationship. And no is like you and I kind of laughed about a while ago. No is my opportunity for the yes, right? I love it when they say, well, we really don't need your product because of this. Wow, that's when I pull out my big checklist about here's all the reasons why that you really do need the product. And don't do it in a spiteful way, but do it in a way that they will see. And maybe the fifth visit, the seventh visit, or the period of time is not going to be right now. A lot of our the timeline for closing aircraft can be a long time, right? So, whether it's an investment, whether it's a regeneration, whether it's innovation for the future, whether it's investors, whatever it may be of the product or service, that first impression and that experience that you bring to the table. I've had a lot of people, like I just talked to a gentleman that, I met last year, mid-year, and he says, we're ready for your product now, right? Stay in touch with them, send them your newsletter, send them a note, send them something unexpected. We get a lot of Christmas greetings, send them something for a different time. I'm not necessarily thinking your State Farm agent that sends you the happy birthday note and then you just keep sending them money for your car insurance. But what I'm saying is personalize it. Say, just wanted to check in with you. Really saw this, that congratulations on this or that. I think that's really key. And, one of the best tools for that's LinkedIn, that there's a lot of news that is posted around. Or if you see something coming to help them out, that you saw this change that's coming that would affect them, that's another checklist item, right? What's the future again? Provide the future, because, people are planning, and they're planning for stability, and they're promising to their investors and their stockholders and their teams. Our company didn't lay off anybody during the pandemic. We actually hired people. So, I mean, that's, shifting the message is a huge one. Be super positive about their business and however you can help them. Even though if they say, no way, there's no way, I just did this, that's great. Be present, stay in touch with them, make another appointment, send them something, because sooner or later, I like to use this one a lot, they'll come around to the fact, if you've got a great product and you've got a great service that fits from their financial or their stability, the future, all those things that we've got to make on that checklist, they'll probably call you again if you stay in touch.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something so critical about checklists that is worth reiterating. And we could take it even out of the terms of the military, and let's just put it in into pilot terms. Most of the people watching this show have hopped on an airplane at some point in their lives. Pilots live and die by their checklists. Even commercial airline pilots. You think while you're sipping on your martini there in business or even in coach that the pilot's just chilling up there catching up on his movies. No, he isn't. He's running his checklist. She's running all of the things that she needs to know in order to get that plane safely in the air. How did that checklist start? It started with fire up the engine and hope this thing gets in the air. And they realized, well, maybe we should measure this. Did it get in the air fast enough? Did it maintain altitude long enough? Did we experience enough turbulence to warrant any of our passengers buying another ticket? And they're then updating their checklist. So that way, a single item checklist becomes 100 long item checklist.
Right.
And we can do this in sales as well. It doesn't mean you got to have 100 questions in front of you, but start with 5 things that you're going to make sure that you at least remember to ask or use on your next sales call, and watch it build from there as you measure. Was this as successful as I wanted it to be? Did this create pipeline movement? Did I get that next meeting? And if you didn't measure up to your goals, look at your checklist. What do I need to adjust? What do I need to remove? What do I need to add? So it's a great way, David, to create a getting ready for your first meeting checklist. Now, for the folks that are interested in get deeper into your world, whether they're in aviation or not, David is somebody that I recommend everybody take the time to connect with, because you'll see him effectively use LinkedIn as a sales leader and as a manager of salespeople. So at the very least, do that. But David, how do we get deeper in touch with you, get in touch with your organization? If we're anywhere near the aviation industry, you're a valuable person to know. How do we get deeper into your world?
Well, I mean, my contact information is on LinkedIn. I think that's one of the best. You can go to technim.com and look at our products and services, see how we present ourselves. I think that's a big piece, because they're gonna look you up. So, I'm not hard to find. I'm not a social media guy, because I want to spend time with my family and not in my phone, because I'm on that a lot. So I think one of the things is we're all accessible. Sean, I really appreciate this opportunity. It's not really there's so many really talented individuals like yourself out there that promote this. If I can just leave one thing with people about, be positive, be observant, be present, all those things I think are different than they were from that checklist years ago. And to measure it, like you're right, did that work? Did that last thing that I did work, or is it working? And if it's not, revise it, because like you mentioned, checklists are revised on a very regular basis. It's like a menu at a restaurant, right? There's a little code at the bottom that says when it was last updated, and usually that's a price, and less items available, unfortunately. And and you said 5s, and I work with 3s. I mean, the power of 3 is super important. What 3 things will they remember of the 30 things that you talk about you? Were you valuable to them, right? Are they going to invite you back? That's 1. Was your product, was it something that's viable in their business and will make a difference? That's 2. And what was that? How can it apply to the business and make it a difference, right? Those 3 things are super. Your impression and your presentation and your product, I think, are the top 3 that we look at, because you come in prepared, you've looked at your checklist, you've revised it, you've improved it, you've done your research, and also, what you learn from that, turn around and say, I know I wasn't able to cover this during our visit, but here's the answer. Be prompt about that, right? Sometimes prep the email before you even get into the office. You might change people that are on the list, but also personalize it. I really don't like leaving voicemails. I wanted to say that today. I think it's super impersonal, and all it does is create, a fiasco of returning calls. I try to take every single phone call. There's not an email that sits overnight in my email basket. I have a ton of emails, but when people look at it, it's like, how do you have 186,000 emails in I've looked at all of them. Okay. And the ones that I need, other than my Google search, which is another huge tool, is put those people into Google search, and Google alerts are huge.
Oh yeah.
Everybody that you're working with in the future in the industry and your competitors, put them in a Google alert, because you want to know those people and what they're doing in the industry. So those are additional tips that I think that I use, and they really have worked in my checklist. It's kind of a mental checklist too. It's just not always written. It's a mental checklist, right?
That's amazing, David. So we've covered one heck of a checklist and a whole bunch of other things. I mean, if I took the time to transcribe every point that David gave, I'd probably be sitting here with at least 3 dozen things that any salesperson could do to be better, faster, more efficient, and provide a better solution to their prospects. So thank you so much for joining us again, David. We're of course going to have you back on, because these conversations are extremely valuable for anyone in sales. And if you're catching this live stream, or you're watching the video, you're doing that on our YouTube channel. If you are on on YouTube at all, I recommend you subscribe to Bulletproof Selling as a channel. And of course, for your listeners out there, you might be listening on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes. Make sure that you're leaving us a review. That's the best thing that you can do for Bulletproof Selling, to make sure we're getting the message out there that salespeople do not have to rely on hope. And of course, for all of the listeners out there, for all the viewers, and for Mr. David Copeland, thank you so much for joining us, sir, and helping to make sales bulletproof. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.